Alright folks, this video is going to be on the major Eastern religions. And again, not all Eastern religions. We're not going to talk about Jainism or Sikhism, both very interesting ones. And we're not going to get too deep into the breakdown of each one. This is just the overview. So to recap, we are going to be looking at Shinto, Confucianism, Taoism/Taoism, same religion, just two different ways from translating it from the original Chinese, Buddhism, and Hinduism. Alright, starting with Shinto. Shinto is a religion that is specific to Japan. It is meant only for Japanese folks. So if you're not Japanese, you can't really practice Shinto. It's not a religion that is made for converts. You can't convert to Shinto. You either can practice it as your birthright if you're Japanese, or you can just enjoy all the cool architecture that is built. Shinto is about 1,500 years old, and it is still very animistic. It sees divine spirits in many different things. These spirits in Shinto are called kami. Now, kami can exist in animals, in mountains, in major rivers, in great trees, even just in big rocks. Kami also exists in the wind and the sun and the moon. And to be clear, not all trees have kami. Not all big rocks have kami. But if you've ever seen something in nature that just overwhelmed you, if you've ever got to see the Grand Canyon, going to the Grand Canyon is a wild experience. You know it's big until you see it. And in that instance, it's common for people to feel like, oh, there is something powerful here. Well, in Shinto, they would say, yeah, the kami, the spirit of the Grand Canyon. And they would say the same thing about many major trees in Japan, really large trees, really large, again, boulders or major mountains. They have this divine spirit in them. The wind, the sun, and the moon all have their own kami. In fact, the word for wind in Japanese is kazi. You might have heard of kamikaze, the divine wind. And kami also can exist in great human beings. So the great poets, the great warriors, the great rulers of Japan's history have all been said to have actually been kami that had taken a human form on Earth. Unlike animistic beliefs, though, Shinto is an organized religion with priests, with temples, and with their own holy books or their own scriptures. And a quick note as we're going through this, you are going to need to be able to recognize the symbols of each of these religions. And in this case, in Shinto, the symbol of Shinto usually is what we call the torii gate. Torii gates are structures that are set up in front of Shinto temples or Shinto shrines, and they're meant to purify the person that walks through them. So if you ever see this symbol anywhere, you know that the person, or you know the source, is referring to Shinto. Like I'd said in the previous video, Confucianism is often called a philosophy, not necessarily a religion. However, Confucianism does have rituals. Just like many other religions, it has temples. But instead of worshiping gods in these temples, they venerate, or you could say exalt or praise, people like Confucius, the original philosopher who had started this thought system, and other philosophers within the Confucian tradition. These temples are also areas where philosophical works within the Confucian tradition are studied. Though possibly the most clearly religious part of Confucianism is something that we call ancestor veneration. If you've ever seen the movie Mulan, you're familiar with ancestor veneration. Many Chinese families maintain shrines to their ancestors, where they will regularly offer things like incense or food, and they will pray to their ancestors for help. But Confucianists believe that you absolutely must venerate your ancestors. You must be giving them respect in order to have the help you need from the spiritual world. And as important as ancestor veneration is, possibly the most important part of Confucianism is know your place in society. Confucianism is very focused on if you are in a superior position, so if you're a ruler, your job is to be benevolent towards the people beneath you. Your job is to care about them and do the best you can for them. If you are in a subordinate position, your job is to be obedient and thankful. That's it. And an interesting part about Confucianism is you don't wait for the other person to do their part. So let's say that you are a citizen of a country that practices Confucianism, or you practice Confucianism. You are expected to be obedient and thankful to the ruler, no matter how bad the ruler is. To really drive this home, Confucianism is what we call a very patriarchal religion. Most religions are. And what that means is men are in charge. And so Confucianism has these different types of relationships: ruler to subject, father to son, husband to wife. And in each of these, the first name that I mentioned is the superior and the other is the subordinate. So husband to wife, a husband's supposed to care for his wife. He's supposed to make sure that he makes decisions that are good for her. Wives are supposed to be obedient, even if their husband is abusive. Same thing for kids. Confucianism is all about you do your job and you know your place regardless of if the other person in that relationship is carrying their weight. The symbol most often used for Confucianism is the character, or the Chinese character, for water. We'll be talking about Chinese characters later, but it's essentially the Chinese writing system. Instead of having letters, they have these characters that stand for each word in their language. Water is often seen as the source of life in many Chinese folk beliefs. Confucianism also makes use of the yin-yang, and we'll talk more about the yin-yang here in a second. So if you see the yin-yang, it might be Confucianism, but if you see this sign over here that looks kind of like a K with a number 7 next to it, you know that you're talking about Confucianism. Again, that's the symbol for water, and it's the main symbol for Confucianism. Confucianism is somewhere around 2200 or 2500 years old. It started in China, and it's still practiced in China, but it is now also practiced in Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. Taoism, or sometimes written and pronounced Taoism. Now, Taoism is the primary Chinese folk religion. And I want to be clear, China's a big place, and there are lots of different folk beliefs around the country, but Taoism is the one that has the most followers. It's the one that ties together Chinese folk beliefs the most. And Taoism is all about living in harmony with the world. It's very what we would call nature-centric. It doesn't believe that human beings should be mucking up nature. What human beings should be doing is trying to live in harmony with nature. A term that you'll often hear in Taoism is effortless doing. This idea of effortless doing things without putting forth any effort, sounds a little bit weird. Of course you have to put effort into doing things. However, Taoists like to point to a leaf on a river. A leaf that falls onto a river, the wind takes it down, the leaf didn't try. The river takes the leaf down, and the leaf is doing things, but it's not actually putting in any effort. It's allowing itself to flow with, and Taoists would call it the Tao. The Tao just means the way. And the Tao is the force that is moving everything along. If you can just catch the Tao, if you can just relax into it and let it take you wherever you're supposed to go, you'll live in harmony, you will be happier, and you will have a longer life. Taoists are pretty invested in the idea of trying to achieve immortality by just not resisting the natural flow. And in terms of this flow, the yin-yang is most closely associated with Taoism. And the yin-yang is often in the West confused with the idea of the forces of good and evil. But in Taoism, there's no real good and evil. There's light and dark. There's hot and cold. As a matter of fact, the yang, the lighter of these symbols, is thought to represent light, heat, day, hardness, masculinity. And the yin, the darker of the two, is thought to represent dark, cold, night, softness, femininity. And these two things together, pushing each other around and around, filling in the space of each one. That's what creates the movement. If you can allow that movement to propel you forward without you trying, you'll be living in harmony with the Tao, and you'll be a good Taoist. And Taoism is about as old as Confucianism. It's a little over 2,000 years old. Buddhism is around 2,500 years old. It originally came from India, but like I said earlier, there aren't many Buddhists left there. However, it's now a large religion, or fairly large religion, in Southeast Asia and in East Asia. Like other religions that came out of India, Buddhists believe in reincarnation. This is the belief that after death, the soul goes on to another body. Though I want to be clear about this, because quite often people hear that and they think like you can have memories of past lives and whatnot. But within Buddhism, it's not yourself. It's not the thing that has conscious thoughts and thinks about me and thinks about the world around us. It's the essence, it's the soul of whatever has animated us, that gave rise to ourself, that goes on to the next body. And in that next body, it creates a brand new self. Buddhists believe that life itself is suffering. To be alive means that you're going to hurt. There's no way around that. And the reason why life is suffering is because we all have desire. We all want things, and we all suffer to bring them about. And I'm not just talking about material stuff here. Of course, people work long hours so they can go on that vacation or buy that nice car. But even the things that we often think of as good things, like romantic feelings, falling in love before you're able to really make the relationship work, is suffering. If you're able to make the relationship work over time, people have a tendency to want to hold on to the person the way they are at the moment they fell in love with them. And of course, people change, and that can create suffering. Education. I think most of us would agree that education is a good thing. I think most of us also agree that there's suffering involved in education. And Buddhism would just say, if you didn't desire, if you didn't want an A, it wouldn't hurt. If you didn't want that love, you couldn't get hurt. If you didn't want a longer life, if you were just okay with what you have now, you could be at peace. You wouldn't be suffering. And so the one way to escape suffering is to stop desiring things. Just enjoy each moment as it is. And so in Buddhism, the ultimate goal is to completely let go of one's own ego. Buddhists believe that it's the attachment to ourself that causes us to be reborn. Our soul has this experience with the self, and it likes it, and it likes the taste of ice cream, and it likes the idea of rainy days or sunny days. It enjoys all those things. And so when death comes, the soul says, I need that again. I need another self. I need to hold on to that ego, or I need to create another ego. And what Buddhists believe is if you can get rid of that desire, if you can let go of the desire even to be yourself, you can go ahead and just meld into oneness with the universe. If one can let go of the self, they're said to be enlightened. If one achieves enlightenment, they don't have to come back again. They enter a state of oneness with everything, something that we call nirvana. And Buddhists would say all these separations between us, the idea that we think that I end here where my skin is at and then other things are around it, that's all an illusion. I am not an individual that's completely separated from the world around me. I'm completely part of the world, and my consciousness, my brain, has constructed this idea that I am separate, that I am a self. Letting that go would allow me to achieve nirvana, to not have to come back and go through the suffering of life over and over again. The founder of Buddhism was called the Buddha. But Buddha, that word just means enlightened one. The actual name of the founder was a man named Siddhartha Gautama. And the goal of all Buddhists is to become a Buddha. That's what Buddhists are doing. When they're meditating, when they're trying to let go of the self, the ultimate goal is to achieve Buddhahood. So if we think about this in terms of Christianity, nobody is trying to become Christ. People in Christianity try to live like Christ, but they're not trying to become Christ. Well, in Buddhism, people are trying to become the exact same thing that Siddhartha Gautama was, the Buddha, because a Buddha is just an enlightened being that is one with everything else. The symbol for Buddhism is the Dharma chakra. This is an 8-spoked wheel. And this represents the fact that Siddhartha Gautama didn't call his teachings, when he was teaching everybody about his beliefs, he didn't call them Buddhism. He called them the Eightfold Path. And we'll come back to this later on, but there's essentially 8 basic tenets of Buddhism. And so the Dharma chakra represents that. And the primary scripture of Buddhism is something called the Pali Canon. And the Pali Canon is just a collection of all of Siddhartha Gautama's teachings. Now, I had mentioned this in the first video, but I need to go ahead and comment really quickly on two terms that you absolutely have to know: sects and denominations. A sect is a major branch of a religion, a branch that's significantly different from how another religion practice or another part of the religion practices. So here in America, many of us are familiar with the difference between the Catholic sect of Christianity and the Protestant sect of Christianity. Both of them are Christians. Both of them use the exact same or a similar Bible to each other. Both of them follow the teachings of Jesus. However, they have fairly different ways of going about that and fairly different interpretations. Below sects, we have denominations, because even within the major sect of a religion, there's still going to be some varieties on how to interpret the scriptures, on how to apply the scriptures, the appropriate rituals. And so again, here in America, many of us are familiar with different Protestant denominations. So here in Norfolk, Lutheranism is a major Protestant denomination. Where I come from in California, there are a lot of Baptists and Methodists. And you might have even heard the term non-denominational. These are churches that do their own thing and they don't subscribe to any larger grouping of Christianity. Well, Buddhism itself has two major sects, Mahayana and Theravada. We'll come back to those in a second, but just be familiar with those words, Mahayana and Theravada. Now, Buddhist clergy, they don't have priests. They do have monks and nuns. And those clergy haven't always agreed on the proper way to be a Buddhist. It is the arguments amongst those clergy that eventually led to the big split between the Mahayana and Theravada sects. And so monasteries are pretty darn important to Buddhism. They're important buildings within Buddhism, but so are what we call pagodas. And you do need to be able to recognize a pagoda when you see one. Pagodas are towers that are tiered. You see, they always have these multiple levels. And these tiered towers, or these pagodas, are usually used to store relics, important objects, from different Buddhist leaders of the past. Now, Theravada Buddhism is the oldest sect. It's the closest to the original teachings of the Buddha. As a matter of fact, it literally just means way of the elders. Theravada Buddhists focus on meditation and individual effort to achieve nirvana. And what that means is that you as an individual have to put in so much effort in order to attain Buddhahood, in order to attain nirvana. The only people who can achieve Buddhahood are monks and nuns. The lay folk of Theravada Buddhism are really just trying to gain enough enlightenment that when they come back in their next life, when they are reincarnated, they'll be ready to become a monk or a nun. So those lay folk may go visit with the monks, they may meditate with the monks, they may hear sermons from the monks, and of course they will give the monks food and money in order to maintain their monasteries and their pagodas. But lay folk of Theravada Buddhism know that they're not going to achieve Buddhahood in this life. They're just getting ready to start that final journey towards enlightenment. Now, Theravada Buddhists mostly believe that deities do exist, but they also think that those deities are in the same traps as humans. They don't think that gods are immortal. They think that gods experience suffering, and they don't think that gods are all powerful. It's just that gods live longer than humans, they're more powerful than humans, and they exist on a different plane. But in Theravada Buddhism, those gods just aren't special. They're going to die someday, and they're going to be reborn again, and their lives are going to be just as tough as human lives. So Theravada Buddhists just don't really pay a whole lot of attention to the gods. The Mahayana sect takes a more relaxed and communal approach to pursuing enlightenment. Within the Mahayana school, even layfolk can achieve Buddhahood. And within the Mahayana sect, there is a belief in something called bodhisattvas. Go ahead and say that out loud. Bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are Buddhist saints who brought themselves to the edge of total enlightenment, but then they stuck around in a kind of a godlike state in order to help other people. They essentially became deities themselves. And so Mahayana Buddhists will pray to these bodhisattvas for help, pray to them for help with achieving nirvana, and pray to them for help in their everyday lives. The main goal of Mahayana Buddhists is to first become a bodhisattva. It's considered to be more moral than trying to become a full Buddha right away. The goal really is to become a god so you can help other people along, and then after a while you go ahead and achieve nirvana. Theravada is dominant in Southeast Asia, Mahayana is dominant in East Asia, and about 7% of the world is Buddhist. Hinduism is another religion that came out of India, and it's still the largest religion in India, by far. Around 80% of Indians are Hindu, and in total, around 15% of the world is Hindu. Now, like Buddhists, Hindus believe in reincarnation, but Hindus place more emphasis on things called dharma and karma. Dharma is natural law. This is the rules of the universe. And within Dharma, there's essentially a belief that everybody has a natural place to the world that they fit into, and they should do their best to fit into that place. We'll come back to this later, but if you're born into a baker family, if your family are all bakers, well then that's the life you're supposed to be pursuing. And when you grow up, you better be the best baker you can possibly be. Because if you don't, there's going to be consequences. Karma is how well one follows that natural law. And so if you're a great baker and you're supposed to be a baker, you accrue a lot of good karma. You can almost think of karma as like a points system. But let's say that you're supposed to be a baker. You were born into a family of bakers, and you're just an outstanding musician, and you decide to become a professional musician, and you really just elevate the art form, you improve people's lives with your music, you're still getting bad karma because you didn't follow your dharma. You didn't follow your natural law. Again, we'll come back to this more later, but dharma is the natural law. Karma is the points for how well you follow that natural law. And so if you get really good karma, if you live in natural harmony with your dharma, your next life, you will come back in an elevated form. Maybe you'll come back as a king, or if you're a peasant, maybe you'll come back as a lawyer. But if you continually break with your dharma, you're going to come back in a lower form. And depending on which Hindu denomination or which Hindu belief system one is following, you might just come back in the lowest of all the human forms, or maybe you come back as a worm, in which case you better be a damn good worm. But Hinduism is an incredibly diverse religion. It has many, many different holy books. There are many different denominations. There are dozens of gods. As a matter of fact, Hinduism is often called polytheistic. Again, polytheism is just a belief in multiple gods, each with their own independent power. Sometimes you'll hear that Hinduism has hundreds of gods. It really is just a few dozen, maybe 40 or 50, but those 40 or 50 can take many different types of forms. However, most Hindus do believe in one supreme god. The most common deities that they will look to are either Vishnu or Shiva. You can see what I mean by being a diverse religion. Some people have one of the gods as the supreme one, some have another of the gods as their supreme god. But it's still the same religion. Hindus that believe in one supreme god believe that other lesser deities were created to serve that supreme god. You can almost think of it like angels in Christianity. Many Hindus would even say that they're monotheistic, that they believe only in one all-powerful god, and all the other supposed gods simply are helpers. But there are Hindus who also believe in multiple gods without one supreme being. Very diverse. Hindu priests are called Brahmins, and the symbol of Hinduism is usually what we call the Om symbol. Just a quick note on this Om symbol down here. You have to be able to recognize that Om symbol. It is a representation of the continual creation, maintenance, and destruction of the universe. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you've heard monks chanting this Om. It really starts in the back of the throat more with like an ah, ow. And you go from that creation of ah to the maintenance of oh to the destruction of closing everything off. But when you hear monks chant this, you usually hear them chant it multiple times, symbolizing bringing the universe into existence, the universe lasting, the universe being destroyed, and then coming into it again. This Om idea is the idea of constant rebirth. As a matter of fact, the three gods that we have on this screen right here, Brahma, the four-headed god, is the god of creation. He is the one that is believed to have created the world. Vishnu, and as you'll see here, many Hindu gods have multiple limbs. But Vishnu is considered to be the god of maintenance. He's the one that really rules over the world as it is now. And Shiva is the god of destruction. Or you can also think of him as the god of change. We often hear that word destruction and think that it has a negative connotation, but it doesn't have to. You've probably heard the expression, you have to break a few eggs in order to make an omelet. If you want to build a brand new awesome building in the place that an old rundown building is at, you have to destroy the old rundown building. Shiva is the god that finishes off the universe so that it can be born again anew. All right, in the next lecture, Western religions.